Today's webinar. This is Barbara Reynolds. I'm the director of the VISTA training unit, and I'll be kicking us off today with just some logistical and kind of orientation announcements before we dive into the meat of our presentation. As you just heard, we are joined and really shepherded today by the team from LSI, led by Mike and his colleague Peter. You'll see them in the participant list in the chat as well, and they'll be available to help us out if we run into any Zoom challenges today. Also online, and who will be speaking with you later, we also have Kelly Daly and Rob Cox from the VISTA Program Impact and Operations Unit. And so we are going to be going through a number of different items with you today and hopefully helping you out as you are here in the middle of December. So just want to do a couple of quick logistical announcements. Mike did just do a sound check. I was happy to see a lot of yeses in the chat there. As you know, you have two options for listening to audio in Zoom. You can do, as I'm doing right now, through the phone. You can also listen through your computer. If at any point your audio is starting to get scratchy or cut in and out, we've had luck switching to the other method. So if you're on the phone, switch to the computer. If you're on the computer, switch to the phone. If any trouble comes, I will say overwhelmingly we don't tend to have any audio problems with Zoom when we're doing our VISTA trainings. Okay, so audio, we also have a Q&A pod for capturing your questions throughout today's presentation, along with the chat box, which you were using a moment ago for the audio. Just so you know, at any point, you can type comments or questions into those sections of the Zoom screen. The folks who are not speaking to you will be monitoring them and we'll be answering questions as we go along. And certainly if there's anything that you type in that the monitors can't answer that we want to bring out to the speaker, we'll do that as well. So just so you know, there are a couple different ways for you to be engaged as we're going through our content today. And then, as you know, we are recording this presentation. So just want to make sure that you're aware of that and that you're okay with it. And we will post this webinar along with the slides and other materials later this month. So you and all of our colleagues will have access to them. All right, so we're going to jump in. It looks like the recording has started. So we'll just head on into the meat of our presentation today. You can see on the screen, here is our agenda. We're just going to do quick introductions. I said I actually shared the quick introductions for AmeriCorps VISTA. We'll get you guys to say, type in your names and a howdy in the chat box in just a minute. Then we'll just take a quick second to look at the year at a glance in the VISTA world. We know folks in the regional offices are balancing a number of different tasks and projects, and so we just want to orient ourselves a little bit to where we are in VISTA land. And then Rob and Kelly will spend the bulk of today's time walking us through and working on VISTA project applications. We'll have time for verbal Q&A, and as I said, you can type in questions throughout. We'll have a link for you to provide us feedback on this webinar at the end of today's presentation, and then we'll wrap up in just about 54 minutes, I'm going to guess, with some closing comments. So for introductions, if you guys don't mind, if you could just take a quick second and type in your full name, your first name, your last name, and where you are physically right now, so what town you're in. And just take a second and do that in the chat box so we can get a sense of who is in the Zoom room with us today. Please make sure that when you type, you select to all panelists and all attendees so folks can see where you are and who you are. All right, I see some names going in there. We've got Ann, New Hampshire. Got Kansas City, it looks like, on the line. Rachel coming in from New Hampshire as well. Great. Emily, howdy. Thank you, guys. Thanks for putting your names in there and your locations. It's great to see. Keep them coming. We definitely want to make sure that we see and are able to acknowledge and welcome and be in at least virtual contact today with all of our colleagues. So Kelly, Rob, and I are here in DC, and we are in different physical spaces, so you may hear us going in and out of each other's spaces while we're presenting. Great, thank you. Susan, Desiree's on the line, Carol, wonderful. Thank you guys for doing that. If you haven't had a chance, please do. Please say a howdy in the chat box. So as we go through our agenda today, we are hoping to achieve these outcomes. We hope that today's webinar, along with other resources and activities that the VISTA team is delivering for ORO staff, that will help continue to build connections between us and allow us to work very effectively together. We also see this as an opportunity to continue to clarify and confirm our different roles and responsibilities for VISTA overall, and obviously today particularly related to project application review. And then finally, of course, as always, we want to share available resources with you, really encourage you and point you in the direction of things that will help you know where to find answers for yourself when we're not on the webinar with you, provide tips and lessons learned as we go through our material. So all of that together is what we are going for today. So now you can see a graphic. Hopefully this is familiar to folks. If you were here at headquarters in October for your in-person training, we started off one of our training sessions with you looking at this year at a glance, and this is obviously our federal fiscal year. Just to draw your attention to a few points I think that are really, really important for VISTA and certainly important related to today's topic. So as you guys know, one thing that's unique about VISTA is that we are in a constant cycle of outreach, project development, project application, project award. It is, as you can see on the screen and as you know, it is a year-round process for VISTA, which is a wonderful tremendous gift, I think, that we all offer local communities. And of course, for us, that has important implications for managing all this work. And as you guys know, of course, that is true. The other sections that you see to the right of the months in this year at a glance, these are large general buckets of activities that our VISTA headquarters staff share with you and with our colleagues in the state offices as well right now. So you can see from left to right, project development is the first bucket, then we move on to grants and MSY management, then we move on to member actions, and then of course we end up on the far right side with project oversight. These are overlapping. I think the way that the image shows up on your screen is a little deceptive because obviously all four of these buckets are happening all at the same time. So they're a little bit more connected and overlapping than what we're looking at here. But again, I think what's important is just reminding ourselves of the recurring nature of VISTA and how we all share these activities together. So for today, you can see we highlighted the concept paper and application review tasks, as those are central and critical for that first big bucket of activity, the project development bucket. We've talked with you about concept paper reviews. We did a good piece with you in October on that. I know Rob and his team have been working closely with you since that training 2 months ago on the concept papers. And today, of course, we're going to talk about project applications in full to really complete this part of the story. So those are the highlighted parts for today and what we're going to focus on. So with that, it is my pleasure to turn over the microphone and the leadership for our webinar to Kelly Daly. You guys know Kelly, of course, is the lead program specialist and works with Rob in the Program Impact and Operations Unit. So Kelly is going to take it away.
Great, thanks, Barbara. I also want to give a big shout out to Melissa McNeely, who had a huge part in preparing the presentation and was going to be a speaker, but has lost her voice to the flu, but is listening online. So feel better, Melissa. Anyway, today we're here to describe the VISTA application process. Look at the various sections that make up the application. Excuse me. Give you a few tips and tricks for reviewing the application, and of course finish up with links to some resources. We hope to leave an adequate amount of time for some questions, so hopefully I do not go all speed racer through this, but we want to make sure we hit the highlights and then get your questions in. What we're not going to have time today is the mechanics of processing an application in eGrants, but you can find that information in the eGrants staff manual. So there we go. And so let's see, next slide, please. There we go. Just as a reminder, the application process is a two-step, as we discussed in the training. That is sort of to reduce workload because of reviewing full applications. All of them would take a large amount of time. There's also, it's a huge investment for organizations. By splitting it, we're able to separate the wheat from the chaff and have you move forward only with those applications that you think will really be a good fit for your states and regions and fit into your portfolio. Unlike the competitive process, you can talk about the application with the organizations you're working with and provide technical assistance. Obviously, during the official GARPs for the other programs, that is not allowable. Once you've reviewed the concept paper to gain a better understanding of the project, as we discussed, that comes to headquarters and then a final decision by the director goes out and you'll be able to either accept, reject, or put the concept papers on hold. When you accept the concept paper, eGrants automatically creates the application. So today we are going to focus our conversation on the second step, which is the application and its review. We understand that many of you have just reviewed applications for the first time, and we want to go over the process and answer any questions. There are basically 4 steps after a concept paper is submitted to it becoming an awarded VISTA project application. Again, given the length of today's presentation, we're going to focus on the middle 2 steps. Sorry, it's a little fuzzy. We need to redo some of the graphics for the new PowerPoint. We're going to focus on those middle 2 steps, highlighted here in yellow and green, what the applicant has to fill out, and then your role in the process. But again, those are highlighted here in yellow and green. All right, as I said, when the concept paper was accepted, the application is automatically created and given a new application ID number. It also pre-populates some of the fields, such as the organization and project information and the narrative fields they completed. At this point, portfolio managers invite the applicant to complete the project application. Usually through email. Most people do not use the correspondence module in eGrants, but they will send a document through email. In the application, the organization is asked to provide additional details describing how the project will address the needs identified in the concept paper and complete a budget. Additional narratives, list all of their sites, do the budget, as I said, and prepare documents that are either emailed or mailed to you. Unfortunately, we're not in the new world system where the documents can get uploaded, but that is the dream one day. Again, there are 6 major components that make up the VISTA application. Today we'll review some of the main things that you should be looking for in each one. First section is the applicant and application info. Those are generally the first 2 tabs that you see in Classic and the organization sees on the left hand in eGrants Phase 2 or the orange screens. Some information included here is automatically populated. However, some additional information that will appear that you did not see in the concept paper, for instance, will be the DUNS number. Whether the application is subject to Executive Order 12372, what program type, and again, the program type for VISTA is standard, support, or program. Brand new projects must be standard, as well as the cost share indicator if that's appropriate. And that just tells the system if they are going to be cost share sponsors. Information they enter in these 2 is what normally populates the standard 424 face sheet, also known as the SF 424. On this screen, you'll see the 4 red narrative statements. Needs, strengthening communities, organizational capacity, intermediary justification, which was optional, have been populated. You can ask them in the instructions to add additional information or make corrections, preferably taking out upside down question marks. We're listing them in the order they appear in the application. You'll note they do appear differently in e-grants. The new ones on the right: project management, the VISTA assignment, recruitment and development, executive summary, and other, which currently is reserved just for summer associate amendments. If an applicant submits an application amendment for summer associates, that's the only time that block should be filled. Sometimes people will enter in that information. We do recommend that you reread the initial ones that came in just to make sure they don't make any changes. Unfortunately, the system doesn't track changes. All right, the project management narrative needs to address 5 major topics. In this part of the narrative, they should describe their supervisor strategies, including the name of the staff member, if identified, who will supervise the VISTA, and identify strategies that will be used to prepare the members for their assignments, such as mandatory orientations and early trainings. They should also identify how they will, what strategies they'll follow for ongoing supervision, like check-ins, feedback, and guidance to the VISTA members. If the proposal is from an intermediary, they need to include a description of their relationship with the proposed sites and plans for coordinating supervision. One of the hallmarks of VISTA is including the low-income community into the planning, so we expect to see that information addressed here as well. We also expect them to discuss project assessment. How are they going to assess the project throughout its life cycle to determine success and make changes? You'll find that performance measures in year 1 sometimes do not reflect performance measures in year 2, 3, and 4 as the project learns and changes and gets input, ongoing input from the community. Excuse me. And lastly, the applicant may amplify their project's anti-poverty efforts by enlisting other national service programs to help support the project. Although this is optional, it's a great way to see partnerships, and the applicant may include that information in this section. Be sure to note that an organization cannot use a VISTA member to complete work for another national service program. There's a fine line between collaboration and then supplantation, which we've talked about before in the training. The VISTA assignment. This is, for smaller projects, pretty easy. For very large projects with multiple assignments, it can be challenging. However, they do need to provide a summary of the goals, the key project objectives, as well as the major activities that they expect the VISTA to undertake for that year. It should also differentiate if they're requesting for a full-time leader. The goals and activities and the tasks and activities they list here should be referenced against the performance measures in the needs sections to make sure they align. You don't want to have a project application that has very specific anti-poverty, capacity building performance measures, and then read in the VISTA assignment that the VISTA will be answering phones and doing basic administrative work, which sometimes you find. Approved projects will use the VISTA assignment information here as the basis for creating their VISTA assignment description, which is created during the recruitment process. Recruitment and development. This is a big one because you will have some applicants that think you have in My AmeriCorps portal. We have VISTA's just candidates waiting to serve. And we all know that recruitment is challenging at the best of times, but that a lot of the recruitment activity is going to have to be undertaken by the sponsor. And in this section, this is where they need to describe to you their plans and their ability to do that. They need to discuss in the section the reasonable accommodations. Each national service project has to comply with several acts, and you'll see it in the terms and conditions in the memorandum of agreement, such as the Rehabilitation Act of '73 and Section 504. There's a disability inclusion page on the National Service Knowledge Network that you can reference, as well as refer them to. Please note, for the first year of a project, we say that you approve them for a period of 15 months instead of 12. And that's in recognition that it generally takes at least 3 months to begin the recruitment process, select, and get a person into VSO. So we start off automatically giving them a free quarter as it will. If the VISTAs are going to need to travel on service-related duties, such as site visits or community meetings, the organization should describe here their plans for reimbursing the VISTAs for that travel. This does not include the daily commute. If they need their privately owned vehicles, this you'll see later in when they do the recruitment, they'll need to state that so it's clear to potential applicants. Obviously, a lot of VISTAs relocate, and one of the benefits that many sponsors provide is housing assistance. You'd expect to see that described here as well. And finally, the orientation and ongoing professional development. It's the sponsor's responsibility to create a successful VISTA member experience. Each sponsor needs to provide the VISTAs with the orientation when they first get on board, as well as provide training throughout the year that is necessary for them to be successful in doing the project. The sponsor should plan for the member on-site orientation within the first month of service, and then provide resources throughout the year. We also recommend VISTA Campus. It's a great resource to develop their VISTA members. The executive summary was originally designed to be a cut and paste piece that we could give to government relations to use in reports. It's hopefully just 4 to 6 sentences, and it's a brief recap of the organization and its project. It should be coming straight from the application. The number of VISTAs and VISTA leaders requested are restated here and should match what you'll see in the budget. And it should give the project's estimated length of time. Right now, there seems to be this sense that VISTA projects are for 3 years. That's not true. Projects can last anywhere from a year to much longer than that. It's about the success of the project and becoming sustainable. VISTA's legislation actually prohibits consideration of how long a project has been a project as a standard for continuing it. You cannot solely look at, well, this project is 5 years old, we get to close it. That is not a factor. As a reviewer, you'll be looking at the entire scope of the project to look closely at the project goals and major activities required to meet those goals and determine if the timeline seems reasonable to you. We do have a template that's in the application. Some projects use it, others do not. I will tell you in the next iteration of the project application, we are going to require it. It just makes it so much more easy. But here's an example of a good one. Obviously, there's a summary of accomplishments for your continuations. They can type not applicable if they're new. But here's an example we liked in the summary of accomplishments. Excuse me. In this section, we do look at that here in headquarters routinely. And obviously, the numbers, we do love to see those numbers in the middle because it also helps them complete their VPRS. This also gives you a clear picture as a portfolio manager of what was accomplished, and you can use it to sort of refer back to their progress reports, which often aren't submitted in time, obviously, to review the continuation. But this is what should be used to help you make a decision for project renewals. Project sites. The organization preferably will have all of its sites selected when they make the full application. We ask for the name, their physical address, not a PO box, unless it is a domestic violence shelter, the supervisor's name, email, phone number, and their EIN. It's important to check. Initially, we got a lot of all zeros or ones, twos, and threes. There's a report that OIT runs to check EINs because the CEO has often asked for what resources a single organization is getting, and they mean not just grants, but also NCCC spikes. Are they a VISTA site? Are they a VISTA project? And so the EIN is the important trigger to run that report. We also use this information to do the national service maps, which the CEO's office uses to take up to the Hill to show how many members and projects are in the various congressional districts. You'll see that we have 3 types of sites. The performance measure site, where the VISTA may not be sitting, but the services that they are doing benefits that site. A member placement site, which is the project location where they are just physically serving. For instance, you may not have space at a school where VISTA is providing curriculum assistance and setting up a new program, but next door at the Boys and Girls Clubs, they have office space for the VISTA to sit. However, you'll find that most of the sites that in VISTA projects are both, where they both sit, but also it benefits from the service performed. The addition of the performance measure site was, we have a lot of VISTAs that'll serve at a Boys and Girls Club, say here in DC at their headquarters, but the program they are developing is at 6 other sites. We essentially wanted to get credit to that Boys and Girls Club as well as to the VISTA program, that there are a total of 6 sites plus the sponsor getting national service resources. Then they'll fill out the performance measures section. Performance measurement was designed to cross all of the programs. We use almost all of the same measures with some differences in that VISTA has both anti-poverty and what we call capacity building measures. It is a course in and of itself, and so we have provided the link to the course. There's also an online tutorial that sponsors can access, or potential sponsors. And I don't know, Rob, if you want to say anything about performance measures. Maybe not. His mic may not be working. Sorry, I hope everyone can still hear me. I've gotten several messages that my internet access is spotty. So can people in the chat say whether or not they can still hear me? Okay, thank you. I'm getting that pop up constantly. When they get to this section, it's clear they have to attach sites for these performance measures, which is another reason we ask that the applicants have their sites at the time of the initial application, that you don't add it in an amendment. Otherwise, you're going to do numerous amendments, and they have to add both the sites and the performance measures at that same time. And it's just easier to know for you as a portfolio manager where they all going to be, as well as the total number, because you should not be approving a project application for 100 slots, shall we say, without actually knowing where they're all going. It's also important if you're approving a project that has sites in different regions, that you can check with the other regions to make sure that those sites are acceptable to them. What we don't want to have happen is you go to give 5 vistas to this site where another portfolio manager has just spent a year trying to close a project down at that same organization. So that's one reason we ask that, or recommend that all the sites be part of that application. Another thing to look out for with performance measures is the goal initially many years ago was that they would all select from the ones that we have so that we could roll them up. However, when we recently looked at the performance measures for VISTA over the last 10 years, there were at least 30,000 unique performance measures because people wanted to tweak language, or they had some very new interesting things that they were doing that did not fit. So in the instances where you have any questions about their performance measures, please feel free to contact a member of the PIO unit, and we're happy to look at that with you. But if you do see that they're using performance measures where you know we have one like that, please encourage them to use what we have and not, shall we go off menu. But again, this is, sorry, anyway, next slide, please. Documents, our favorite. Right now, these are the documents that are listed in the application. Articles of incorporation, obviously not applicable to public entities. Board of directors, the org chart, proof of tax exempt status. We also ask that you double check that online at the IRS website. Most cases, organizations should know who the supervisor is going to be and attach those, and then letters of support. Those we anticipate changing in FY 2020 with the new application instructions to reduce burden. I will say that in the new grant system, timeline undetermined, it was hoped that we would be able to have many of these documents attached to the organization and not each application, because Boys and Girls Club of Concord, New Hampshire only needs to give us their copy of Articles of Incorporation for VISTA, for Senior Corps, for AmeriCorps once, not for all three. Unfortunately, right now, I know there was a question in JIRA about where these documents should go. There isn't a response yet. I think SharePoint is pending for those sites, but one senior portfolio manager said they would be storing submitted documents in grant files in your team space. So I hope that's still correct, but please confer with your senior portfolio manager. The budget. Previously, prior to e-grants, VISTA did not do a budget, but as part of the streamlining and wanting to make all of the programs have the same sort of model, VISTA began using a budget even if they are not getting a cash grant. So for new applications, they generally do not have to fill out section 1, which is, or budget section 1, which is where they would list staff expenses, but they do have to fill out budget section 2, which is where they tell us the slots, and right now estimate the number of education awards versus cash stipend. Generally for non-program grants, that is standard and support projects, you can have them put in 100% education awards. It only really matters for program grants. There are two ways to look at the slots, and that's one thing we wanted to point out. You'll see in this example that they list individual sites, and that's helpful. Some other offices prefer not to list the specific sites, but just aggregate them by the allowance rate. So you would have 10 at the 14,136, but you would have just one line, say for the last two, 5 at 12,311. It's their preference and yours. Obviously, for very large projects with multiple sites, we do recommend aggregating by the allowance rate. I will point out for those that are reviewing grant budgets, supporter program, that any staff person listed in budget section 1, they are subject to the criminal history check. Therefore, unless we are paying part of that person's salary, and our budget is a little more restrictive than the other programs, in that the staff listed in that we will pay for must be supervising VISTAs or be directly related to the management of the project. So if you have a program grant and you have an accountant doing payroll, we can pay part of their salary. But unless we are paying them, we recommend that they do not list large numbers of staff just to show non-federal contribution. They can put that information in the narrative and not here in the budget. Otherwise, again, you will be responsible for ensuring that all of those staff have the adequate criminal history check on file. Again, only budget section 2 is required. There are some additional lines. We don't show the full budget here, otherwise we wouldn't be able to see it. But there are other line items that they can show to document the resources that the organization will provide to support the VISTA project, such as training. The important things, tips for reviewing the application. Making sure the project aligns with VISTA's programming priorities is important, but just as important is if you have a state identified need. For instance, in Mississippi, Louisiana, they have continuing needs related to the hurricanes and storms. Not listed in the guidance as a national priority, but it's still very important for that state. And we recognize that most state portfolios should be a blend of both the national and any local identified ones. Please confirm that the organization is using their legal name as in their paperwork. What happens is once a year, all of the organizations getting resources are uploaded to grants.gov, regardless of whether or not they have a cash grant. And then grants.gov checks to see what the legal name is. And if someone comes back, we get an error report, and then the Office of Grants Administration will have to go to the programs, who then come out to ORO to get the legal name corrected in the database. And that's not just in the application, but they would need to change their eGrants account. Please review the entire application, that the updates that you asked for in the concept paper feedback were made to the narrative questions. Obviously, make sure that people completely address all the different narrative questions and looking out for any prohibited activities, particularly supplanting staff or other existing volunteers, any census work, advocacy, things we talked about previously in the training, and ensure that the number of slots in the budget matches what you plan to approve in the memorandum of agreement. I know that in some cases, or in a lot of cases, due to the portal stopping placement because we can't have more members on the project at any given time. And so some will over award. You only plan to ever give a project 10, but you're going to put 15 in the budget in case members overlap during the PSO months. It just, in some of the other programs, when you get to the PO certification screen, it'll ask you for the number of slots you're planning to approve. It must be what's in the budget. Some of the other programs, I know the budget stays 10, but you write something else in the PO cert. For VISTA, they must match. Okay, I am seeing a question going back to the budget. Let me go for that. If applicants have entered information into section 1 of the budget, should we advise them to remove it? If the application has not been awarded, sure, that's fine. But again, only if, I would say, if it relates to staff, I would remove it. Again, they can tell you what type of staff will be supporting the project, but unless we're actually paying those salaries, I would not have it in the budget. Thanks for the question, Rachel. You've read the application, you reviewed it, you're going to proceed. What happens next? Well, there is a staff review screen requirements policy, is what we call it. And it discusses the narrative blocks and eGrants that need to be completed in the processing phase. And it's essentially just providing justification for why you're approving this project. And it's pretty simple. It's just, you know, how do they meet either national or local priorities? And then in terms of if you're giving them a budget, are the budget requests reasonable? Do they follow policy? So that later it's an internal controls piece. We can go back and see why, you know, how this project was approved. It was one of the recommendations made years ago by the Inspector General. So. As a reminder, a lot of our resources on both concept papers and applications are in the single package on the SharePoint site that includes the RFCP templates, but also the concept paper and application checklist, which crosses over when you review the full application. But This is the link to that site, and the PowerPoint will be made available. At this point, are there any questions about the project application, the review process, what you should be looking for? Please put them in chat. I don't know if we're using Q&A or just chat. I am not seeing any questions. Well, while people think, oh, there we go. We're going to open the phone lines. Has everyone already started reviewing full applications, whether new or continuations? If you could just say yes or no in the chat. Couple of yeses. Great. Here's one comment. Anne, I saw your comment, deadline of December 11th. I want to clarify that while we are trying to, both for workload, but consistency to external applicants, giving, timelines of when VISTA project applications should be reviewed and awarded. Obviously, there are going to be some projects where you have to do a lot more of back and forth. Perhaps they don't have all their sites identified. Perhaps it's a national project. And you're coordinating with staff in other regions or existing clusters, and it takes longer. That's okay. We'd rather have you get a really good application awarded the first time rather than award what we call a ghost application and then go back and do amendments to fix it up. So I appreciate you making that comment. I mean, remember to talk about timelines. Any other questions, particularly about the budget? The budget for us is pretty simple, only in that we do not fund a lot of things. Primarily for support and program, it is supervision, travel, and transportation. We do not, in any of the grants, have a line item for indirect costs, which is different from the other programs. All right, Barbara, I am not seeing any questions and I'm not hearing any coming over the phone, so.
Okay, yeah, we're going to transition now just to take a quick walk through what we've done so far today, and we do still have a few minutes, so folks were typing, sorry, and I interrupted you. We can certainly grab any more questions that you may have in the next few minutes. So you guys have heard just a quick, but I would say very thorough discussion of the project application review. Kelly shared resources for you and kind of where to go next from this. We just talked a little bit briefly about the year at a glance for VISTA. So at this point, just want to see if there are any last questions on what we've discussed today, what you've heard from us, or really anything that is VISTA fantastic. Any questions you have at all for our VISTA program staff. Again, we are happy to answer whatever we can with you on the phone today, on the line, and we will certainly follow up if there are questions you have that we don't have good answers for. So we'll just take a minute and see if anyone wants to raise your hand and ask a verbal question, or if you want to type something into the chat. right, I am scrolling over our participant list. I'm not seeing any hands. There is, oh, I do think there's a question that just came in. Is there a deadline for when we should be done having a back and forth with applicants who are making edits to their applications? Kelly, what say you?
Not really. What I usually do is sort of look back from when the upcoming VSOs are. So when could they place a member, and backtracking from that to make sure they have adequate time. So if you have a lot of back and forth and you're right up to the window of there's 2 weeks left to enroll people in the next VISTA member orientation, obviously that's not going to be enough time for them to do their VISTA assignment descriptions, the service opportunity listings, and recruit. So if you have in your allocation decided that you're placing members in February, they need to be awarded, I would say, by the end of this month, to give them at least 30 days to do the next step in the process, because unfortunately projects can recruit on their own externally, but they cannot create service opportunity listings or VADs until they are actually awarded an e-grant. So they can't begin to accept applications in the My AmeriCorps portal until they are awarded. So I would work backwards from when your region, state has decided, okay, these are our big placement months in our state, and therefore backing out from that, we need to give people 30, 45 days to recruit, maybe longer depending on where you're at. In the more rural areas, obviously, we try to give people longer, and then work back from there.
That's awesome, thank you. Thank you for that question, Rachel. So I think with that, seeing no hands raised and no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and transition to our next steps, so folks on the line will know.
Barbara, sorry, there's another question I just saw.
Oh, sure.
When we submitted concept paper decisions and headquartered weighed-in as concur with the reservations, what were the reservations? Those should be listed in the spreadsheet in the comments column. Sometimes it had to do with we checked and it wasn't the legal name, or we felt there could be a chance for staff supplantation, if I remember the last batch correctly, or we identified one org as possibly having multiple resources from other programs, but it should be in that spreadsheet.
Awesome, thank you. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and transition to the next step, so folks will know what is to come. I think we've touched on this today, but just as a reminder, you guys know we have our online system for submitting questions and getting answers at any point from our VISTA staff, and of course Kelly is our guru in that system, so please get in touch with us there. As we mentioned, we will post the recording along with the slides for today's presentation. You guys know we at VISTA have launched monthly office hours, just open calls once a month, as well as a monthly webinar like this, and we will have both of those for you in January as well. And then obviously we are going to be looking, as we get into 2020, we'll be hoping to gather feedback from you guys and work on updating and really refining this training curriculum for you as we develop it. We develop it for you guys, as well as start looking to the phase 2 new colleagues who will be joining us later in the winter. So those are our next steps. I do just want to ask if you have a few minutes along the lines of refining our curriculum and getting feedback from you. This is just a brief survey, really should take a few minutes. If you could, if you have time, please complete this. There's a link in the chat. And when we log off, this should also open up in your browser, but if for some reason it doesn't, if you just want to grab that URL, we'd really love to hear your feedback on today's presentation, and we will use it right away as we're getting ourselves ready for January. So thank you in advance for taking a few minutes if you have those this afternoon to get that done. So hopefully, you know, we've covered everything in our agenda today. We have, I believe, made good progress in accomplishing our outcomes. Again, trying to make sure that you guys have access to the VISTA staff in order to continue to build connections and feel like we are real and we are good resources for you. We talked through, Kelly, I think, gave a lot of great information about who does what and when with the VISTA project applications, and then we shared resources for that particular task, as well as for continuing to interact with our staff and get questions answered. So I feel like we've made good progress on the desired outcomes. I definitely want, again, to thank you guys all for logging on today and taking time to spend with us to talk about the VISTA project applications. We know, of course, this is a tremendously hectic time in everyone's work and probably your private lives as well. So thank you very much for your time. I certainly hope that you have a good rest of your December and a really happy holidays. So again, thank you guys very much. Have a good afternoon.